What about the media, right? That riles up the public through scarcity, creates a pandemonium out there, right? Shouldn't there be regulation around that? If everybody starts to think more abundantly, then they won't worry about how much you got in their car. They'll deal with it as they would have normally. It's the master that stands in the eye of the storm, while the storm runs chaos around you in circles, but in the eye of the storm, it's complete zen. Okay, which is why it's important that when you center yourself, you become zen in the eye of that storm.
Welcome everybody to another Martial Mind Power podcast. I'm Jatinder and we are here with Sifu Lak, and today we're going to be diving into our amazing book, if I get it right there, The Art of Thinking Without Thinking. And on today's episode, Sifu Lak decided to choose a topic. So over to you, Lax.
Well, it's funny actually, when you say choose, what I did was I did a little flickety flick myself just before we started this, and this is the one that came up. And let me just show you the picture of this, and you'll be able to see the title. So it's Scarcity Scares, Abundance Assures. And for the listeners, it's a picture of some wheat in on a field of wheat, all right, which kind of indicates, abundance. Okay. And it's, they say everything happens time appropriately, JT,
Yeah.
and this, I think, is time appropriate because it's very fitting to what's happening right now. So scarcity scares, abundance assures, right? So you want to give this one a stab, see what?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, sure. I mean, obviously, as soon as I heard that one, it's like you said, it's so relevant. So at the time of this recording, we've got this whole petrol surge thing going on in the UK where people are trying to fill up their tanks, running around. And it's just one of those things you think about. I say, if you just spend your day normally, you just do what you normally do, it wouldn't be a problem. And the problem is because everyone's rushed to it, right? So that scarcity scares people, and everybody all of a sudden just jumps in, tries to fill up their tanks and just tries to make sure that they're okay, right? And so yeah, it was interesting. So that's the first thing that popped into my mind. But obviously, with the whole kind of scarcity scares and abundance assures, for me, it relates a lot to marketing as well. Like when we're online, we're doing online marketing, sometimes they talk about creating scarcity, which is interesting and it works, but if it's done authentically, right? And if it's just done for the sake of scaring people, then it can be used as manipulation, right? So it's an interesting one. And definitely when people think certain things are in abundance, they might not take the action. They say, I'll do it tomorrow, I'll do it later. But if they go with that mindset, then they might get the scarcity element happening as well. So it's a really interesting dynamic in how those two work out together.
100%, man, 100%. And the funny thing is, you mentioned the scarcity factor in marketing tactics and strategies that companies often use. It's that whole thing, when there's not enough, you want it, and there's that whole idea that you always want what you can't have, right? And to give an example, if you're single, and and I've noticed this, that if you're single, you always look at people that have got partners, and you're like, oh, I want that. You always want what you haven't got. And then when you're in a relationship, then, and let's just say you have an argument, then you don't want it. It's just bizarre. So you just say, be careful what you wish for. In this kind of scenario, a cousin of mine actually was speaking to a Tesco a fuel delivery driver. He was delivering a lorry full of fuel to a local Tesco's, and he was just speaking to him. I think it was quite late at night because he was coming back from one of his late shifts. He's a security guard. And the gentleman told him, he said, look, there is an abundance of fuel in the UK. There are more than enough drivers in the UK. The issue is only with BP, right? BP have got a logistics issue or something like that. And as a consequence, media have played it quite badly and created this scarcity factor. And all of a sudden, people that have maybe half of a tank that would usually wait till, the light comes on to fill up, have decided instead they're going to go fill up. And the people whose fuel gauge light has gone on, who do need to fill up, are just doing what they would normally do to go to the petrol station to fill up. It just happens to be everyone that's got half a tank or more is still going to get filled up as well, because they're afraid. So scarcity really does scare people, right? And it's in the name, scarcity, right?
The toilet paper runs to mind as well there.
Yeah, it just happens to be that all cities are running scared. Scarcity. Right? So there's a wisdom one for today, right? And I think people just need to take a breather, right? And just think, well, act consciously. Do we really need to fill up right now? Are we really going to go anywhere? Don't have a car full of fuel sitting on your driveway for 2 weeks in anticipation you might want to go somewhere when you don't need to go anywhere, and you're not going to go anywhere for the next foreseeable near future. What's the point, right? And therefore, there's plenty to go around. So let's flip the script. And flipping the script is, okay, well, if scarcity scares and we're saying abundance assures, well, how do first of all you think in an abundant mindset? Firstly, those people that have got enough fuel in their car, right, to do the regular journeys that they would normally do, then they don't need to go out and refill up, right? They don't need to max out their tanks with more fuel. They've got enough. So just rest assured that when you go to the fuel station, petrol station, there will be fuel there, right? Because there is, unless you're going to a BP a petrol station. So, and all of a sudden, that mindset starts to comfort and assure you that everything is okay, right? And we also must kind of get into the habit of getting our facts straight, okay? The media will say something and the whole nation will jump on it like that, right? And then as a consequence, everybody ends up in this race, right? To get or take whatever they can. And the pandemic was the best example of this. And we've spoke about this on other podcasts as well, when the pandemic first hit out. The bizarre thing is people went out, as you know, rushed out to buy the toilet paper. And you just mentioned that a moment ago. And I was just, sat contemplating, thinking, well, you've got all the toilet paper. I wonder if you're going to have actually any food and drink in you to actually use that toilet paper to wipe up, right? Because nobody was thinking about food and drink at the time. It was toilet paper. I mean, why? And again, I mentioned this on a previous podcast. There was a gentleman that was interviewed, right, by some newscaster, and he had these big packs of toilet paper, and the interviewer said, wow, how come you bought all these toilet papers? And he literally turned around and said, I don't know. Everybody else is buying them, so I just thought I'll buy some. So you get this mass hysteria, right? Mass hysteria, just because everybody else is doing it, you have to go and do it as well. Because, maybe it's a FOMO thing, fear of missing out.
And the herd mentality.
Right. And again, fear of missing out. It's again anchored in fear, isn't it? We have to be careful about becoming scared about silly little things.
Yeah.
Because it is silly, right? But if we just act normal and did things in a normal way, right, then there's enough to go around. And, there's enough technology, there's enough resources, right, that we've got in the West that we can live comfortable, if not luxurious lifestyles. Okay.
Yeah.
Right. There is, and it doesn't matter, who you are, you can live a comfortable life, right? And even then there's provisions for you to live a comfortable life. There's always exceptions to the rule. There's always kind of like outliers on the extreme ends of extreme ends of that scale. But for the most part, people can live comfortably, and those that are obviously wealthier can live more luxuriously, right? We have the resources, right? And this is not about how you make wealth to live comfortably or luxuriously. This is about scarcity scaring and abundance assuring, right? So if you act normal, there's enough to go around. Because before the petroleum scare, right, everyone had fuel in their cars. Okay,
that's right.
Right, everyone had fuel in their vans and lorries and trucks and whatever. There wasn't a problem. People weren't queuing up outside petrol stations thinking, in case I want to go somewhere, I should have some fuel.
Yeah.
Now you're over-calculating things, right? You're overthinking things, and therefore you're overacting things. And as a consequence of overacting things, you're creating more concern and more anxiety and more nervousness and more worry and more problems for yourself and for everybody else. Because if we haven't, I really do think sometimes we haven't learned anything from the pandemic, right? And this is the one thing that I'm talking about, is everything we do as a collective affects everybody else. So I think, if a corporation or a bunch of corporations do a certain thing that will say, let's just say, affect taxation, right? Guess what? The HMRC jumps on it, right? If the general populace do a bunch of things that will affect, again, let's just say taxation, because that's always an important one, right? Then guess what? HMRC is going to jump on it and make sure there's taxation measures in place, right? But what about the media, right, that riles up the public through scarcity, creates a pandemonium out there, right? Shouldn't there be regulation around that?
Exactly.
I'm sorry, but this is a pile of shit, right? So these media companies need to take responsibility for creating chaos in our nation. That is huge, man. That is huge.
And that's the funny thing about this, is because when we see these things happen and the media does something, right, and it's not then being addressed by government as such, right, then people start to think, well, the government's not saying anything, so maybe the media is doing it deliberately. Yeah. Right. And people start to fill up the gaps with their own thinking and start to create these little situations and scenarios. And now we don't know what the hell's going on. Right. Government's trying to, help do things, put things, measures in place. Media is doing because they want the news and the numbers and whatnot. And it just becomes this really nasty political kind of situation where, as a responsible nation, are we actually taking into consideration how, like you said, it's going to affect everybody or the individual? Right. Like the saddest thing about this, right, is like you say, I'm working from home, right? So if I'm rushing out getting petrol in my car, it's like it's not as important as a doctor or a nurse who needs it, right? Because they have to go and do surgery for someone, right? Yeah. And it's like little things like this, and you think, what on earth is going on? But then you start to go into the other conversation about, well, does that mean we start to prioritize who gets access to things? So it starts to get messy, right?
Very messy. So I think we need to nip this in the bud. Really, I think media has a social responsibility. It has a social responsibility to care for the nation, and also understand that what they say and do has an impact on the way people think. I know, right? We already know that is the media messages can be manipulated to help people to drive and steer people to act in a certain way. Okay.
So, you know, like what you just said on that, there's like a marketing term that's used, it's called clickbait. All right. And that's when, you know, you create like a headline of sorts that is supposed to be, you know, entices people to actually follow through and look into it. And the unfortunate thing is sometimes clickbait kind of headlines can suggest one thing, but when you read into it, it's actually something else. And a lot of people don't actually read into it. You know, they just take it at surface level. They can't be bothered to look into it, right? They take it at surface level, and then the surface level information goes out and gets spread and basically goes viral. And all of a sudden, everybody's hearing this little noise, but they haven't actually looked into what's going on. So there's like a dark side to it as well, or, you know, and I think people should be a bit careful to really look into what's going on and get that information properly.
Yeah. And I think this all boils down to that wonderful word that I keep using is consciousness. Right. Acting consciously. You know, our media companies need to act consciously, right? And so do all the individuals, right? Because it's proven that you can manipulate somebody's behavior by saying a certain thing. Okay? Because not everybody is on a high state of consciousness, right? And this isn't a criticism of society and the people within it. It's a fact. Not everybody is centered. Not everybody can take a deep breath and think, well, okay, well, if this is what the media is saying, let me take a bit of time to think about this and maybe do a bit of research and find out what the facts are. Yeah. Not everybody is going to take that approach. A lot of people will do a knee-jerk reaction and think, fuck it, I need to go get some fuel in my car because before it runs out at the petrol station. And then you've got a freaking half a mile queue, right? That's slowing all the traffic down, and somebody dies because an ambulance can't get through to a victim that's, you know, critical, you know, and that's what's happening. It's costing lives. And that's just to name one of the little things that has happened. Well, little things, you know, one of the things that's happened during this fuel crisis, which technically is not really a crisis. It's just BP have got an issue with their process within their workflow, whether it's their logistics and so on, and that's affected us all because of the way media has communicate that message. And I think,
and it's like you said, it might not even actually be a big thing. It might just be something that they were going to resolve and get sorted out. And it's like you said, the media just, and then everybody just went a bit crazy.
Exactly. But on the flip side, abundance assures. And this requires for you to have an abundant mindset. I'll give you an example. I needed to fill up my daughter's car because she actually was on empty, and she said, Dad, can you fill up my car? And I said, yeah, absolutely. And I just felt that it's going to be okay when I go out and get some fuel. And I went to the local petrol station. There were about 10 cars in the queue. I literally I was at the station, at the gas pump, within 10 minutes or so, filled up the car, moved my car to one side, let somebody else come in. So, you know, things kept moving, paid, came out, left, job done within 15 minutes. And I know a lot of people have been waiting 40 minutes, 1 hour, longer than that even, to fill up because they're afraid that they're going to run out of fuel on the way to wherever they're going. Or potentially not have enough fuel for the week to get to work, or and so on. A friend of mine, he had to leave his car in London because he ran out of fuel, and he literally said he went to something like 10 petrol stations within London, central London, and none of them had fuel. But London's a unique place, especially central London, because there's not many petrol stations in the first place. And then if everyone's gone and panic bought, then, you know, they've drained them all dry.
Exactly.
So it makes it even harder. And then you've got a big traffic issue as well, and so on. So it exaggerates the situation. But it's a great example to use in this koan about scarcity scaring, because it's exactly the mechanic that's happening here. if everybody start to think more abundantly, then they won't worry about how much you got in their car. They'll deal with it as they would have normally, right?
Yeah.
As it would have normally, without thinking there's any kind of scarcity out there whatsoever. Because technically there wasn't. Technically, it was just BP had an issue.
Yeah. So you see, that's an interesting point, because you spoke about mindset, right? And you talked about like the scarcity mindset and the abundant mindset. Like one of the things we could talk about there is that, you said, how do we actually like think about these things, or what's actually going on? Now, what ends up happening is that when people hear these things, they internalize and they start to create stories, and it's their thoughts that they start to run away with, because all of a sudden they think, oh no, I've got no petrol. I'm not going to be able to get to work. What if this happens? What if that happens? And this happens? And all of a sudden they create this situation and scenario in their mind, which wasn't there a second ago.
Yeah.
Right. And all of a sudden they create it, and it's like, oh my goodness, I need to get a petrol, and start to panic. Right. Yeah. And it's the true on the opposite side, where you're thinking abundantly, where you're thinking, you know what, there's enough petrol. Let's go out there. And like you said, you waited just 15 minutes to get your petrol sorted out. Right. So let's talk a bit about that. Like, people becoming aware of their thoughts, and actually being conscious, like you said, conscious about what they're thinking about, how they actually get into that state in the first place, so they can make that conscious decision, actually think about it, as opposed to just being run on autopilot.
So I think the first thing that you need to do is a simple thing that we do autonomously anyway, and that is breathe, right? Just take a breath, right? Take a deep breath. And they always say, before you're going to make your mind up about something, or before you are about to respond, take 3 deep breaths if you're not sure, and allow yourself to become mindful and aware of what's happening, right? Orientate yourself within the situation, observe the situation, orientate yourself in the situation. Now, John Boyd, who was a US Army colonel, he came up with something called the OODA loop, OODA, right? And we use this as a process in martial arts. And this was a military process that he created. The first O means observe. The second O means orientate, right? Third letter D is decide. And the fourth one is A is act. OODA, OODA, okay? And this process, he came to the conclusion that when you're flying in a military aeroplane, a fighter jet, right? Everybody is going through this OODA loop, okay, in their mind, okay? And the idea was, John's idea was that what you want to do is you want to intercept your opponent's OODA loop, right? And set them off on a different OODA loop, right? So what you're doing is you're disturbing their thinking pattern, right? Which happens in this OODA fashion, right? You start a new OODA loop, right? So that you can intercept that thought process while it's jammed and redirected in a different direction. That way, what happens is it buys you a millisecond, right, to take down your opponent's plane, right? Now, it's a military warfare idea, right, based on cognition and your cognitive processes. Now, we do use the same methodology and the same process within martial arts. When you're fighting an opponent, you want to try and ensure that your opponent is caught up in a thought process, right, which buys you a bit of time so that you can gain an entry and then finish off, incapacitate your opponent. Now, something like that could be, you could fake your opponent, draw their attention and draw their limbs to a certain direction, right? Maybe draw their hands up high, right? So that you can open up their midriff or their lower line, right? Or you can get them to block low, right? So you can open up a high line to attack on the high line. Now,
well, Bruce Lee used to go, what?
Exactly, right? But it's the same approach I'm going to suggest, right, when it comes to getting into abundant mindset. is, first of all, observe what's going on. What's going on, right? Get the facts. Observation is seeing, to see fully, to see accurately, get the whole picture. Don't just take a media article's word for it. Get the facts, okay? And if somebody's talking about, a crisis or a problem with delivering fuel to petrol stations, then look at the companies and how what the companies got to say for it, right? What's Tesco fuel subsidiary saying about it? What's Asda's fuel subsidiary saying? What's Costco's fuel subsidiary saying about it? What's Esso saying? What's Shell saying? What's BP saying? Oh, BP the one with the problem. The others seem to be fine, but because everyone's doing a run on fuel, they're all running out. So, but the deliveries are still coming at the same time they normally came, right? So observe what's happening. Then orientate yourself within that space to see where you fit into that. How does that affect you, right? How does that affect others? How does that affect us, okay, as a collective? How does that affect the environment? How does that affect other sentient beings? So if you're going to think consciously, you've got to be holistic about that orientation, right? It's not just you, right? Because this is a problem in the first place. You only think about yourself. Everyone's a selfish bastard, right? And all they think about is only themselves. So that's why we end up in a situation like this, because you didn't think about everybody else. Orientate yourself, right? Consciously in that space. Then, and only then, are you capable of making an informed decision? Got a bit of a dry cough, guys, so apologies. Only then you can make an informed decision. Informed meaning is the key word, means that you've got the information to back up your decision. A conscious decision based on facts, okay? Not a whim, not you being manipulated, right? But an informed decision. And then once you've decided, then take the appropriate action, okay? And guess what? That means that actually that's a conscious decision-making process, all right? And that's what we should really try and get into the state of doing. But that OODA loop, right, before you even kick off a thought process where you're going through all of that, take a deep breath. Just center yourself. Don't allow that fear to creep in and trigger your adrenal response, okay? Trigger your fear response. Because guess what? Maybe you are being manipulated. And if you are, guess what? Who's a fool for becoming scared, right? You can't afford to. Center yourself. I mean, look, this is the same thing we teach in martial arts, right? First time you spar, everybody will feel butterflies in their belly, right? Why? Because they're scared, right? Everybody will feel adrenaline. Some people feel sick, right? Some people can't go on. Some people freeze. Some people want to run. Some people will fight. But either way, whatever you decide to do, you need to learn to sit with that adrenaline, okay? Because that adrenaline will make you jittery, will make you nauseous, will make you feel sick to the stomach, will give you those butterflies in the belly. And some people have ab reactions. They will puke, okay? And that's very normal, right? Because people don't understand what the adrenal response and that chemical adrenaline feels like in the body. This is that fear mechanism, right? But remember, the fear response is a physiological response. And let me mention two more physiological responses that we have on a daily basis, right? In addition to fear, right? 1, thirst. 2, hunger. 3, fear. They're physiological responses. So don't we have a responsibility to drink water or become hydrated when we're thirsty? Yes, we absolutely do. Otherwise, you're going to get sick and your organs are going to start to become strained, right? And things are going to start malfunctioning in your body if you don't hydrate properly, okay? 2, hunger. When you're hungry, you must eat. Okay. In fact, when you're hungry, it's a little bit late. But either way, eat something to refuel yourself, to get your glucose levels up so your brain functions fully. Glucose is all about fueling the brain, right? Your brain is the primary thing that your body needs to fuel so that it can function properly. And on top of that, you can think properly. Remember, we're talking about thinking here and consciously thinking. So if you don't have glucose up here, guess what? You're not thinking straight anyway, right? So that's the second thing, right? Third thing is fear. We're always going to feel fear, right? Just like thirst, just like hunger, you're going to feel fear. There's going to be things that are going to trigger us. Now, we can control fear, okay? Because fear is our internal primal survival mechanism, right? And it's so inbuilt genetically that it's hard for us to get rid of it, but we can master it. And mastery of your fear mechanism means getting used to it, what it feels like. And taking that deep breath, when you take 3 deep breaths, right, before you go into the OODA loop that we just mentioned already, the idea is, and it doesn't matter. People say breathe in through the mouth and breathe out through the nose, right? There is a reason people say breathe in through the mouth, right? Because if you breathe out of the mouth, it dries your mouth. When you breathe in through the mouth, it doesn't dry your mouth, okay? So this is the only reason that people say breathe in through the mouth, breathe out through the nose, right? So if you were to do this and we could do this together, you take before you start, take a double exhalation. Breathe in. Breathe out. Now, consciously breathe in. And as you're breathing in, breathe right into your belly. Expand your belly. Hold. And then breathe out and compress your belly. Let that belly go all the way down. Expel as much air as possible. And the last one, breathe in. Expanding that belly. Breathe out. Contracting that belly. Then what happens is you start centering yourself. And the thing is, obviously our lungs are not in our belly. But what's happening is when you breathe in, okay, you're expanding your diaphragm, right? And what's happening as a consequence is it's acting like a suction pump, pulling air into our lungs, okay? Therefore, you can push your belly out because it allows your diaphragm to expand maximally, okay? So you get a maximum amount of air in, okay? What happens when you get maximum amount of air in, you get maximum amount of oxygen into your system, which means your cells in your body and your brain will work optimally, okay? More oxygen, more optimal cell performance, okay? Then when you breathe out, you're expelling all the carbon dioxide, which no longer serves you, right? Allowing you to then repeat that process of inhaling more oxygen and repeat the process. Do that 3 times. When you do that 3 times, slowly, and if you want to, you can go 6 seconds in, 6 seconds out, 6 seconds in, 6 seconds out. You can take that a step further. You can go 6 seconds in, hold for 6 seconds, 6 seconds out, hold for 6 seconds, and repeat that 3 times, okay? And at the end of that, you'll feel calm, right? You'll feel centered. You should feel centered in the core, right? Just around your navel area. You should feel like a centeredness, a solidity, a stabilization of yourself. And then observe, orientate, decide, and act, okay? And that's the way to approach it. And only then will you start to become reassured that you're taking a mindful and mindfully aware approach to whatever you need to tackle. And this is anywhere, you know. This is, you know, you could be in a relationship and there may be an argument kicking off, okay? Take a moment, okay? Go through that process. You may be in a professional environment at work, or you may be in a random situation where somebody's aggressing you, right? Someone's trying to mug you, right? Or put you or a loved one in harm's way, right? So wherever your fear mechanism is being triggered, take a moment, center yourself. It's really important. And I tell you how key it is to be centered is, and this is going to be a common theme, right? Because self-mastery is ultimately ensuring that we live in a space of kindness, compassion, and love, okay? Rather than fear and negative emotions, okay? So this topic is one that we have to cultivate as part of our self-mastery process. So when it comes to that, we must keep practicing, and we must practice in all aspects of our life, okay? All aspects of our life. And the better you get at it, the better you become at doing this, the better you become at doing it, the better you become at making conscious decisions. In combat, if you're in sparring or you're in a fight situation and you're only acting by your primal responses, the adrenaline is going to take you and wash you away like a wave swiping you, okay? But it's it's the master that stands in the eye of the storm while the storm runs chaos around you in circles, but in the eye of the storm is complete zen, okay? Which is why it's important that when you center yourself, you become zen in the eye of that storm. And that eye of that storm might be some media publication about a fuel crisis and not enough delivery drivers and whatnot. I mean, they can get their facts wrong, okay? They might be misinformed in the first place, right? They just want a story, like you mentioned earlier, right? And the other thing is, bad news sells. Good news doesn't sell, right? So they also know that. So if they're going to get a scoop on something and they can kind of, were that out of control, for them, for that industry, it's a scoop, right? But when it's creating pandemonium, when it's costing lives, when it's costing your inner peace and harmony, then I would question, hold on, what can I do to ensure that I maintain my peace and harmony and keep chaos and fear, right, swirling around me away from me? And I want to sit here in the middle of that storm completely zen, right? And that's where we want to be.
No, absolutely, Lex. I'm glad you shared that. And I just wanted to, just in case somebody's thinking, I don't know how to be zen, or just, sometimes you have words that people get a bit confused with. I just wanted to share another angle on it, in the sense that, if you're going into like military training, you're going into police training, going to SS and army and all these kind of things, they put you through situations and scenarios where it's almost like bombardment, right? And they're teaching you to be present in that moment so that you're able to think better while all this shit basically goes on around you. Yeah. And it's that same principle, in the sense that they put you through a different type of training. And it doesn't necessarily mean you have to go through that. But if you're going through that route, then obviously that's how you're going to learn it. But if you're in your normal everyday life, then the Zen approach, getting the breath work and getting centered, like Alex is sharing, is something that is very, very powerful, because it's all about getting present. And like you said, getting in that moment and becoming Zen. So, thank you for sharing on that side of it. And I just wanted to also, what was coming up was that it's so interesting how, as you're sharing these things, I'm thinking about these things, thinking that over the years, we learn so much good stuff and so much shit that we don't actually really, consciously aware that we're doing it, right? It becomes autopilot, A perfect example is like, if you're watching a movie, something's happened in the movie where everybody's running all of a sudden. Now, in people's mind, they think that if that situation happens, they play that out in real life as well. Yeah. So they've got their learning in a really weird way. And one of the reasons we like sharing this is because sometimes we don't always come across good learning. We don't come across how to think. We just get caught up in whatever's going on and around us. And, one of our kind of goals is that if you hear these podcasts, then, it is showing you that there is another way to think, and it all begins with the breath work. It really does, getting present to it. And in martial arts, that's a key element as well, because every time you do punching, fighting, you're always told to, manage your breath, because the breath gets you present, right? And when you get present, that's the moment where you can actually almost like reprogram your biocomputer to get rid of the autopilot and auto running commands and actually think and stop and reprogram the way you think about things.
100%, man. Bruce Lee famously said, all knowledge is self-knowledge. And, if we are not cultivating self-knowledge through the process that we call life, then we're failing. There's no other way to put it. Okay. And the solutions to cultivate that are very pragmatic. And that's one of the things that that I feel is key to any self-mastery and self-realization, is that it must be practical and easily accessible. Anyone should be able to do it, right? We don't all have to go, to the Himalayan mountains and sit with sadhus and gurus in order to learn these things. We don't all have the opportunity and the time and the freedom to go and chase a guru in the mountains of the Shaolin monastery and things like that. We don't, right? So how do you do that where you are? There are people with families, people who've got children, and they've got grandchildren even. We can all do it. Doesn't matter what age you are, even if you're a child, even if you are an infant, right? And you've got some comprehension around following basic instructions, you can learn to become mindful. You can learn to start to meditate. These are just simple things. But meditation is not always sitting, right, in complete stillness for hours on end. It's a moving meditation I'm talking about, right? Because most of the time when faced with a fear-inducing situation, you're going to be on the move, right? Might be out and about, right? You might be outside of your home comfort environment, your safe zone, right? In which case you need to operate that at that moment in time, wherever you are. So you are your temple, and you carry your temple with you wherever you go. Why? Because it's here. People think I need to go to a temple, a church, a mosque, monastery, gurdwara, whatever it might be, right? No, man, you are your own temple, right? Even when you go to these places, right? Where is the work taking place? It's happening inside you.
Exactly.
Right? It's happening inside you. They are just places where you can focus and congregate. And on top of that, you have a collective consciousness. Other people are going there with the same mindset, with the same intention, right? So guess what happens? In physics, they say, if you take one wave of a certain frequency and you get a second wave with the same frequency, its amplitude will double, okay?
Yeah.
That means...
constructive waves, they're called.
Exactly, right?
Yeah.
So when you have a collective of people, that means a group of people that are thinking the same thing, that are emanating the same vibration, that vibration will amplify, right?
Just like a battery, just like when you have multiple batteries, right? 1.5 volt, 1.5 volt, it becomes 3 volts. Similar principle.
Exactly. So here you go, listeners, right? You are getting a physics lesson, right? But we are physical, and we are metaphysical as well, right? So we must honor both of those aspects, right? They're not separate. They're part of two sides of a coin, or as I say, two sides of an indivisible coin. So we must honor all of that, okay? And in order to honor all of that, we must look inwards when we are faced with situations like this. And only then are you going to get into an abundant mindset. Only then are you going to feel assured that everything is okay. Everything is okay. Even with this scaremongering and petrol stations that run out of fuel and temporarily closed and so on, everything is okay, right? Just take a deep breath, we'll be fine. Fill up when you need to fill up. Don't fill up when you don't need to fill up. Guess what? You can also stop doing luxurious trips, right? Here and there and everywhere. Walk, take a bicycle, buy a skateboard, whatever you need to do, right? Buy one of those scootery things, you know, you know, try and if you've got the options, use different modes of transport. I've had to go in to teach in London this week, the JKD classes, and I went by train. Why? I didn't want to add to this petrol situation. That's why. Okay. It's simple. I can catch a train. How did I get to the train station? I did get a ride into the train station, but it wasn't me driving all the way into London and back. So I used 1.8 miles of petrol as opposed to 30 miles there, 30 miles back. Okay. So that's acting consciously. Just balance things out a bit, you know, and that way
exactly,
it's going to be fine. Because guess what? I've saved myself filling up, right? So somebody else could, right? Somebody else that needed more than I did, right? So if we all think like that, we all start to think, well, actually, you know what? Why don't we think about other people? Why don't we think outside of ourselves? And this is something beautiful happens. And I'll give you an example, right? I'll tell you this story by example. The Dalai Lama, right? He went to see Desmond Tutu, okay? And on his way from the airport to see Desmond Tutu, he had a chronic stomach ache, okay? Chronic stomach ache. I mean, pain, right? And he was in this car. He was in a complete agony. And as he was driving, he noticed this poor man, right, on the side of this road, right? And he was filthy and he looked sick and he looked hungry, okay? And this was in South Africa. He looked at him and he started feeling compassion for that man, okay? He started feeling, oh, I need to feed this man, you know. What pain would this man be going through, you know? What, you know, if he could have a nice roof over his head to keep him dry and a warm bed at night. And he started thinking about that man, okay? I mean, they were driving past, so he couldn't stop at that time. But as they were driving, he just started to put his mind and in his attention on that man. And what happened? His pain in his stomach subsided by a magnitude of order, okay? And it allowed him to get to the other destination because he just kept thinking about that man. The thing is, the moral of that story is, when you think about other people and trying to help them out, your problems disappear, okay? And this is something that we could all do. And it's very simple. Just help other people. Think about other people first in order to help them. When you help other people, guess what? Your problems disappear, right? Or at least they'll be drastically reduced, all right? And it'll make it okay. And this isn't a diversion tactic that you're diverting your attention on someone else so you don't have to worry about yourself. It actually will help you heal too, right? Because you're doing the ultimate service, and the ultimate service is in Punjabi and Guru Granth Sahib Ji, we call it the seva, right? Selfless service. We need to get into this mindset. Really important. And that way, when we start thinking about others and giving to others, we start becoming abundant because we have enough, because somebody else hasn't got enough. And now that becomes a special way of being, right? And we've all got that power. We're all special. We can all feel that way and we can all be that. And I think if we just start to change that, the way we act, right, then that all changes. But remember, before you act, you must decide. Before you decide, you must orientate. Before you orientate, you must observe. Before you observe, take a deep breath. 3 deep ones, right? And there you have it.
Oh, wow. I think that's an amazing note to end on, Lex. it just goes to show that, if we're faced with these situations, it's like Sifu Lak said, just breathe, just take a breath, calm down. And so did you want to read that, Lak? So I see you pointing that book towards me there.
Yeah,
almost forgot.
Let me finish off, right? Let me finish off by, do you know what? You read it. Why don't you read it for a change?
Today, of all days, when I've got a odd voice, I'm going to sound like a frog.
You've got an odd voice. I've got a dry cough.
Oh, man.
We're a right pair today, isn't it?
Yeah, I know. So, okay. So shall we go half 50-50 then?
No, you go all the way.
My goodness.
You got this.
Oh, I haven't read a book in ages. No, okay. We live in a society where we are programmed to move towards taking action through scarcity. This is the underlying mechanism behind it. Consumerism. Oh, wait, I've lost my throat there. Where corporations control people by manipulating the human physique, psyche and behavior through media and marketing to move people towards purchasing things. And in this information age, we are exposed to targeted marketing and advertising based on these corporations collecting data from our every move from our digital devices so they can predict and project wants, making us more susceptible to wanting more unnecessary things. Beneath the scarcity mechanic, fear is being triggered, making us feel like there is not enough to go around and that you must go out and fight to get it for yourself at any cost. What I call take mindset. This is our intrinsic primal survival response, which is being exploited for financial gain and control. Due to globalization, the whole world is more connected than ever before. And this modern day concept is unsustainable as a global community because it serves a few rather than the whole. In fact, we have better technology and resources than ever before to cultivate and produce the things we need in abundance, quicker, and to a higher standard of quality. So in reality, there really is no excuse. What would happen if we flipped our mindset to one where everyone realized there was more than enough to go around? What if we changed our mindset from take to give, where you have so much that you want to shower gifts onto loved ones that you cannot give them away quickly enough because you have so much to give? All of a sudden, we would no longer feel scared. There isn't enough to go around. Rather, we would be overwhelmed with a feeling of assurance that we have enough, that we are enough.
Wonderful.
Cool.
Wonderful and well read.
Yeah, I made it through without coughing, so that was good.
It's almost like you were nervous reading there for a minute.
Yeah, I was.
What's going on here?
I haven't read a book out like that since primary school.
Oh shit! Did I trigger some school horrors?
School horror, yeah. Oh, brilliant. But you know what? Doing podcasts and things like that has basically helped improve that. So it just goes to show that practice makes, practice in anything is a good thing, right?
Absolutely. And you read that as you got past that first paragraph, you was flying.
Put me on the spot there. There you go. That's active thinking.
But this is the thing, right? To become learned, you have to learn, right? Yeah. So as I say, keep learning, keep growing. There's a wonderful teaching that Bruce Lee used to share with his students, and he would say, something along the lines of, right, once you stop learning, you're in a waiting room ready to die, because now you're going to become stale and stagnant, and eventually decay and death ensues. So keep growing, keep learning, because that's how you keep the energy moving, and you'll never become stale, right? You always stay invigorated and refreshed and re-energized, and just keep that energy moving. And this is all boils down to your energetic body, yeah, and that energetic body shows into your physical body and expressed that way. So keep it alive, guys. Keep it present, stay in the moment, and in that moment, just do anytime anything kind of tries to imbalance your center and that energy, don't let it in, man. Don't let it in. Take those 3 deep breaths, and observe, orientate, decide, act. Off you go, and you'll be good as gold.
Absolutely, man. Absolutely. And on that note, thank you very much, Sifu Lak. And we hope you guys enjoyed that. And remember to go check out the book, The Art of Thinking Without Thinking, which is available on martialmindpower.com as well as Amazon. So you're more than welcome to take a look. And obviously, if you have any questions or you want to reach out, feel free to do that. Again, martialmindpower.com. And okay, until next time, thank you very much.
Thank you very much, guys.